I was a wife, a homemaker, and by all appearances, content. But everything I knew, every quiet routine, every silent dinner, changed the night he walked back into my life. My stepbrother. I hadn't seen him in 20 years. And yet, with one glance across the Christmas table, my world started to shift. This isn't a story about betrayal. It's a story about waking up far too late and feeling something I thought was long gone. I never thought I would become the kind of woman who cheated. I used to hear stories like mine and scoff. Women with too much time, too many needs, and too little self control. But things look different from the inside. They feel different. And feelings, well, they're stubborn, complicated things. Sometimes they sneak into the cracks left behind by the quiet decay of a long marriage. My name is Rachel. I'm 52, a graphic designer who works freelance from our quiet, weathered home on the coast of Maine. My husband, Mark, is a financial consultant, tall, reliable, always dressed like he's about to step into a meeting even when he's just walking the dog. We've been married for 27 years. I'd be lying if I said he wasn't a good man. He is, just not good for me anymore. At least not all of me. The beginning of this story doesn't start with a fight or some epic discontent. It begins with a phone call on a gray Sunday morning, one of those April days when spring is technically here, but the sky forgot to get the memo. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, making scrambled eggs and ignoring the way Mark always scraped his fork against the plate like a dog at a screen door. The phone rang. I wiped my hands on a dish towel, saw the name, and paused. Jason. I hadn't heard from him in almost 10 years. Jason is my stepbrother. That word feels loaded, like I should clarify that we didn't grow up in the same house. He's my mother's second husband's son. We only met when we were both already adults, around 30, after years of our parents being single, the kind of family you see at awkward holiday dinners where everyone's drinking wine a little too fast and hoping the conversation doesn't turn to politics or divorce. But I remembered Jason. How could I not? He had this presence, this quiet confidence wrapped in a crooked smile. He was 6 years younger than me, tall and lean with the kind of effortless masculinity that made women stand up straighter when he walked into a room. The last time I saw him, he was 28 and working construction out west, hands rough, eyes always scanning, like he saw everything and held back just enough to make you curious. I remembered too well how, one Christmas, we drank too much bourbon by the fire and he confessed. He'd always had a little crush on me. We laughed it off. I blamed the whiskey. But later that night, I caught him watching me with a look I couldn't unsee, a look that warmed places inside me I'd forgotten. Now, a decade later, he was calling. Hey, he said. Sorry it's been so long. I'm in town. Thought maybe we could catch up. The casualness of it disarmed me. I found myself brushing my hair before I even agreed to meet. We decided on coffee. Public, harmless. He suggested this small cafe by the marina, and I arrived first, ridiculously early, trying to tell myself I wasn't nervous. And then I saw him. Jason hadn't changed as much as I had. His face was more lined, sure, and his stubble was flecked with gray, but he had the same lazy grin, the same damn eyes. He hugged me like he meant it, long enough to notice the firmness of his body against mine, and something stirred in me, a slow, unexpected pull. We talked for hours, about our parents, both now divorced again, about work, about how he'd left construction to open a small woodworking studio in Vermont. But it wasn't what we talked about. It was how. There was this current under everything, an invisible thread pulling us closer with every sip of coffee, every smile that lingered too long. At one point, I laughed, really laughed, and Jason looked at me like he was seeing something sacred. You always did have the best laugh, he said, voice low. I remember that. That night, I lay in bed next to Mark, staring at the ceiling. His back was to me, his breathing deep and even. I could smell his aftershave, comforting, predictable. I felt like a ghost in my own marriage, like my skin didn't quite fit. The next time I saw Jason, we didn't meet in public. He invited me to his Airbnb, a small, modern cabin a few miles out of town, tucked in the woods where the only sounds were birds and the occasional rustle of leaves. I told myself it was innocent, that I was curious, that nothing would happen. He opened the door in jeans and a worn Henley, barefoot, holding a glass of something amber. His smile was easy, inviting. "Glad you came," he said. I stepped inside. The cabin was warm and smelled like cedar and cologne. A fire crackled in the corner. Jason offered me a drink, and I took it. I needed something to do with my hands, with my nerves. We talked. Again. But this time it felt charged. Every word, every glance. He sat across from me, legs spread, body loose in that way men are when they're entirely comfortable in their skin. He listened with this full, unbroken attention that made my heart race. And then, the silence stretched, grew heavier. "I shouldn't say this," he said slowly, "but I've thought about you a lot. Over the years." I felt the heat climb my neck. "Jason? I'm not trying to make anything complicated," he said. "I just wanted you to know." But things were already complicated. He stood, walked over to the fireplace, and poured himself another drink. Then he looked back at me. "You ever think about that Christmas?" he asked. I nodded before I could stop myself. He walked back, slow, deliberate, stopped right in front of me. I should have said no. I should have stood up and left. Instead, I tilted my face up and kissed him. It was soft at first, testing. His hand slid around my waist, pulling me closer, and I let myself melt into it, into him. The kiss deepened, grew hungry. I felt years of silence unravel between us in the heat of his mouth. We didn't make it to the bedroom. The rug in front of the fire was soft enough. He undressed me like someone unwrapping a gift they've waited years to open. Slow, reverent. His hands knew where to touch, how to coax every hidden ache from me. I responded like a woman who hadn't been seen in years. It wasn't wild. It wasn't rushed. It was better than that. It was honest. Erotic in the kind of way that doesn't rely on youth or novelty, but on the raw vulnerability of being fully present with someone who wants you, not out of habit, not because of shared history, but because they see you. Afterward, we lay tangled on the rug, the fire painting flickers on our skin. He brushed hair from my face, traced lazy circles on my hip. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. More than okay. But I wasn't okay. I was cracked open, awake. When I drove home, the guilt hit. Mark was in bed, reading. He smiled at me, unaware. I kissed him on the cheek and showered away the scent of cedar and sweat, but I couldn't wash away the memory. That was the beginning, the first of many stolen afternoons. Always at the cabin. Always with the kind of intensity that made me feel younger and older all at once. It wasn't about sex, not entirely. It was about being wanted, being chosen. I told myself it couldn't last, that it was temporary, that it didn't mean anything. But it did. God help me, it did. For the first week after that night with Jason, I walked through my days like I was made of paper. Thin, weightless, half-transparent. Mark didn't seem to notice. He still left his shoes by the door, still asked if I wanted more coffee in the morning. The same routines, the same silences. Only now, they felt louder. Every sound in our house echoed inside me differently. The click of his toothbrush on the porcelain sink, the way he stirred his cereal, his voice on client calls. All the tiny normalities that used to blend into the background now stood out like sharp corners. Not because Mark had changed, but because I had. Jason started texting me in small, careful ways. "Hope you're warm today. The way you bit your lip last night. I can't stop thinking about it." He never pressured. He never assumed. He just reminded me, in a dozen little ways, that I was being wanted. And I responded like someone starving slowly who had just rediscovered the taste of salt. We met again 2 days later. And then again. Always during the day. I would tell Mark I had a client meeting or that I was working from a co-working space in town. It wasn't difficult. We'd grown used to long hours apart, even under the same roof. He respected my independence. He just didn't realize it had grown legs and walked right into someone else's arms. Every time with Jason felt a little different, more urgent, more dangerous, more deliberate. Sometimes we barely spoke, just pulled at each other's clothes like the world would end if we didn't touch skin to skin. Other times, we lay in bed after, talking for hours, our bodies still touching, like the space between us was sacred now. I started noticing things I hadn't in years, the way my own body responded, how alive I felt, how I laughed more easily, how I checked my phone like a teenager, how I found myself pausing in front of the mirror, surprised by the blush in my cheeks, the softness in my eyes. One afternoon, I wore a silk blouse that I hadn't taken out in years, white, loose in all the right places, with just enough transparency to make my bra a secret only Jason would see. He opened the door, looked me up and down, and murmured, "Jesus, Rachel." He pulled me inside, pressed me against the wall, and kissed me like he was trying to drink from me. His hands slid up under the fabric, fingers slow, tracing every contour like he was trying to memorize me. We didn't even make it to the bed that day. But there were quieter moments too. One morning, as I traced the line of Jason's jaw while we lay tangled in warm sheets, he asked, "When did you start feeling alone in your marriage?" It wasn't an accusation. It was soft, curious, but it pierced me anyway. I blinked at the ceiling. I don't know, not all at once. It's like you look up one day and realize no one's really seen you in years. You go to bed beside someone, but your dreams belong to someone else, or no one at all. He nodded, pulling me closer. That's what I used to feel with Claire, before we split, like we were roommates who sometimes exchanged polite favors. Does that scare you? That this could become that too? I asked, my voice quieter than I meant. No, he said simply. Because this started in a place I never even got to with her, and I don't think I've ever really lied to you. Not even with my eyes. There was something about that, not even with my eyes, that stayed with me. At home, things began to shift. Mark noticed I was happier, and oddly, it made him more affectionate. He started bringing me coffee in bed again, brushed my hair back before leaving for work. One evening, he made dinner, a small, almost forgotten gesture, and played soft jazz while we ate by candlelight. I wanted to appreciate it, I did. But when he reached for my hand, I flinched. It was subtle. He probably didn't even register it, but I did. Because in that moment, all I could think about was Jason's mouth on my neck 2 days earlier. The way he whispered my name like it was a secret only he deserved to say. I began compartmentalizing my life with surgical precision. Mornings belonged to Mark. Afternoons, to Jason. Evenings to dinner, Netflix, idle scrolling, late nights to memory. I started writing again, too. Something I hadn't done in years. Just little things, fragments. Sentences about skin and breath, and the way a man's voice can feel like fingertips when it dips into your ear. Jason read them, sometimes aloud, his voice rough, full of something I couldn't name without shaking. One rainy Wednesday, he showed up at my house unexpectedly. Mark was in the city for work. Jason texted, simply, "I want to see where you live, just once, with you in it." I hesitated, then sent him the address. He arrived in a navy sweater, damp from the rain, his hair slightly curled from the moisture. I stood in the doorway, suddenly unsure. The contrast was stark. This man in my real space, no cabin, no safety net. He stepped in quietly, respectfully, walked through each room like he was walking through a dream he didn't want to wake from. In the living room, he paused at the fireplace mantel. "You and Mark?" he asked, gesturing to the framed photo of our wedding day. I nodded, heart tight. "You are beautiful," he said. "Still are. But you look different now. There's more fire in you." He sat on the couch, and I sat beside him. We didn't touch at first. We just sat, breathing, listening to the rain. Then his fingers brushed mine. And that was all it took. We made love on the couch, slowly, reverently. No clothes flung across the room, just unbuttoned, peeled back, like an offering. It felt dangerous, sacred, a violation and a homecoming, all at once. Afterward, as I lay with my head on his chest, he whispered, "I don't just want pieces of you." I closed my eyes. The rain kept falling. I couldn't answer. Not yet. Later, when he left, I sat in the silence of my house, my real life, my husband's mug in the sink, his book left on the coffee table, his cologne still faint in the air upstairs. I was living two lives, and both felt real. Both felt like mine. But I knew, deep down, they couldn't coexist forever. Still, I kept going, one day at a time. one lie at a time, one secret afternoon at a time. And Jason kept showing up with his touch, his patience, his hunger, and the one thing Mark hadn't given me in years: attention without assumption. The affair wasn't just about sex anymore, it was about recognition. And soon it would force me to choose. But I wasn't ready. Not yet. Spring bled into early summer like watercolor, slow, warm, slightly messy. The days were longer, and so were my excuses. I told Mark I was meeting clients farther out of town, that I was joining a new professional collective that met weekly. I even invented a woman named Dana who supposedly worked in textile design and had the kind of chaotic creative energy no one could verify. Mark didn't question much. He trusted me. That trust used to be comforting. Now it pressed against my ribs like guilt with a pulse. Jason and I kept meeting in the cabin, always between noon and dusk. The way we touched each other changed over time. At first, it was about urgency, months, years of neglect poured into every kiss, every grasp, every pressed whisper. But now it was quieter, more deliberate. He knew my body better than I did. Sometimes we didn't even need to speak. He'd brush a hand across my shoulder, and I'd close my eyes and know exactly what he meant. And yet, outside that space, the rest of my life continued. Laundry, grocery shopping, Sunday calls with my sister, Mark bringing me the paper and asking if I wanted to try the new cafe by the pier. I nodded, smiled, said, "That sounds nice," and meant it. In a strange way, I did. But every time Jason touched me, it reminded me what had been missing, not just in sex, in presence, in curiosity, in being seen not as a wife, or a task partner, or a woman in her 50s winding down, but as someone who still pulsed with want. One Thursday afternoon, Jason brought something new, a small wooden jewelry box he'd made himself. "It's walnut," he said. "I remembered you liked darker wood grain." Inside was a necklace, simple, a flat gold disc, barely larger than a coin, strung on a delicate chain. My initials weren't on it. There was no inscription. It was anonymous. Deliberately so. I pressed it to my collarbone. "It's beautiful," I said. "You don't have to wear it," he murmured. "But I wanted you to have something that's just ours." I did wear it. Almost every day, tucked under my blouse, close to my skin. Mark never noticed, but sometimes, in moments when I leaned into him or sat across from him at dinner, I could feel the disc, a cool, silent reminder of what I'd done, what I was still doing. It wasn't that I loved Jason, not yet, but it was becoming harder to remember who I was before him. We began texting at night, more than before, carefully. I changed his contact name to Dana, Textiles. We joked about it. Sometimes he'd send me a photo of the bed he was building in his studio, or the mountain outside his rental window, or a candid selfie, bare-chested, sawdust in his beard, smirking like he knew exactly what it would do to me. I sent him pictures too. Never obscene, never desperate, just a glimpse of my thigh in the bath, a book I was reading in bed, a smirk in my robe by the window. It wasn't about pornography. It was about intimacy, about saying, "I wish you were here," without words. One night, after too much wine, I slipped into Mark's bed and tried to summon the woman I used to be with him. I kissed his neck, let my hands explore the familiar map of his body. We made love, slowly. It wasn't unpleasant, it was practiced, gentle, but it felt like playing the notes of an old song by memory, without hearing the music. Afterward, he pulled me close and said, "I miss you sometimes, even when you're right here." I lay awake for hours after that. The next day, I told Jason we needed to slow down. His face changed. "Because of guilt?" he asked. "Because I don't know how to end this," I said. "And I think you're starting to mean too much." He looked at me like he was trying to memorize something that was already disappearing. "I've waited 10 years just to kiss you again," he said softly. "I'm not asking you to burn your life down, but I'm not going to pretend this is nothing either." I cried in his arms that day, the kind of quiet, exhausted crying that comes from not knowing what the hell you want anymore. And yet, I kept seeing him. Not because I was selfish, though maybe I was, but because going without him felt like forgetting how to breathe. We started staying in bed longer afterward, watching the sun creep across the wooden beams. He cooked for me eggs and chorizo, coffee with just a splash of cream. I started calling it our place. Not aloud, just in my head. Jason told me stories I hadn't heard before about his childhood, his first heartbreak, how he almost didn't go to that Christmas dinner where we first met. I almost failed, he said one afternoon, fingers tracing the inside of my wrist. But then I saw you through the window, laughing with your mom, and I thought, well, damn. He leaned in, kissed the inside of my palm. Best stupid decision I ever made. Some part of me wanted him to ask me to leave Mark, to say, let's just go. But he never did. He knew I wasn't ready. I was terrified of the fallout, of being the woman who dismantled 27 years of marriage for a man who built things with his hands and kissed her like she was a fire he couldn't stop feeding. Instead, it came to a head in the smallest, quietest way possible. Mark found a receipt, not for a hotel, not for lingerie, just a coffee receipt, 2 drinks, 1 pastry. The cafe I never told him I visited. What's this? He asked one evening, handing it to me with the detachment of someone who's already guessing the answer. I felt the blood leave my face. I must have left that in your jacket pocket, I said, too quickly. His eyes lingered. Then he nodded. Right. But that night, he didn't kiss me goodnight. He turned off his lamp and lay in silence. I stared at the ceiling, throat tight. I didn't confess. Not then. Not yet. I wasn't ready. And the next morning, everything resumed. Laundry, toast, talk of the neighbor's dog. But I knew. He suspected something. And it made Jason's presence feel even more dangerous, more electric. We didn't stop. If anything, the edge of risk made it worse. The next time I saw Jason, I didn't undress slowly. I pulled him onto the bed like I was drowning, and he was the last gasp of air. Our bodies tangled, mouths colliding, hands impatient. He whispered my name like a curse, like a prayer. I cried out like someone unraveling, because I was. After, we lay there, our skin still damp, breathing in each other's scent. Jason rolled onto his side, looked at me like the world was ending. I don't want you to break, he said, but I also don't want to be a secret you hate yourself for. I don't hate you, I whispered. I hate how good it feels. He kissed my forehead. That's the most honest thing you've said. And it was. But honesty has a cost, and my time was running out. The morning everything changed. I woke before sunrise. The house was quiet, heavy with that deep kind of stillness that only comes just before the world stirs. I padded into the kitchen barefoot. The floor was cool beneath me. I made coffee like I always did, measuring the grounds, listening to the soft drip of the machine. But something was different. I felt untethered. Not in the dramatic, midlife crisis kind of way. Not the kind that begs for a convertible or a new hair color. No, this was deeper, quieter. I felt like a woman slowly dissolving into the life she built, piece by piece, until the parts that made her pulse had grown transparent. I drank half a cup before walking upstairs to the spare room. Jason's necklace still lay in the drawer of my writing desk, the gold disc catching faint light. I hadn't worn it in 4 days. I picked it up, held it in my palm like a confession. Mark and I had barely spoken since the receipt. He hadn't brought it up again, but his silences were longer now, less comfortable. I started noticing how he looked at me, like a man trying to see into a locked box he used to hold the key for. That afternoon, Jason texted, "Come today just to talk." I hesitated, then replied, "1 hour." The drive to the cabin felt heavier than usual. The fields we passed weren't golden anymore. They turned green, thick with June. The sky was open, cloudless, like a held breath. He opened the door and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. We didn't touch. Not right away. He gestured toward the couch. I sat. He brought me tea. For a long moment, we just looked at each other. Then he said, "You haven't been yourself lately." "I don't know who myself is," I replied. "That's the problem." He sat down beside me. "I think you do. I think you've just spent so long being someone else's, you forgot what it sounds like to hear your own voice." That hit harder than I expected. I looked down at my tea. "You make me feel alive," I said. "But I don't know if that's enough." He nodded slowly. Do you want to leave him? I didn't answer. Not for me, Jason said. Not to come running here. I just mean, do you want your life back? I looked out the window. The sun was casting long strips of light through the pine trees. I could hear birds, the wind. I think I want a life I don't have to split in half. Jason's eyes softened. Then maybe that's the real answer. We didn't kiss that day. We didn't undress. We just sat, quietly, our hands barely touching, like the air between our fingers was more honest than anything else we could do. When I left the cabin, I didn't look back. I didn't go home right away either. I parked near the marina, walked until my legs ached. I passed couples, people eating ice cream, teenagers in sun-faded hoodies laughing like they'd never heard the word consequence. I sat on a bench and stared out at the water, and I let the truth settle. I had loved Mark once, fully, fiercely. We built a life, weathered hard years, lost friends, buried parents, raised dogs, shared flu seasons and birthdays and the same ugly brown couch for nearly a decade. But I wasn't in it anymore. I'd stepped outside the frame. And once you've seen your life from the outside, from the angle of want and freedom and new breath, it's nearly impossible to squeeze yourself back in without breaking something. That night, I told Mark, not everything, but enough. We sat across from each other in the living room. No music, no distractions. Just two people who once knew how to make each other laugh before bedtime. I've been seeing someone, I said, voice low. He looked at me for a long time. No reaction, no anger, just quiet processing. Do I know him? He asked. I hesitated, then shook my head. It doesn't matter. He nodded, slowly. How long? Months. Silence again. Then he said, You could have just told me you were lonely. I didn't know how to say it anymore. I said, I didn't know if it would matter. We talked until almost midnight. He didn't yell. He didn't beg. He just looked like someone watching a familiar house burn from across the street, helpless to stop it, too stunned to run toward it. I told him I wasn't sure what I was going to do yet. He said, I hope you figure it out. I really do. And then he went to bed. I sat in the dark, alone, listening to the sound of my own breath. 3 weeks passed. Jason and I didn't speak. I told him I needed space, to think, to feel everything instead of just reaching for more distraction. During those weeks, I took long walks. I started writing again. Not erotic fragments, but essays, quiet, painful, honest ones, about womanhood, about hunger, about how you can live in a house for half your life and still feel like a guest in your own skin. Mark and I tried, softly. We made dinner together. We took a drive along the coast. We even slept in the same bed some nights. He held me once while I cried, and neither of us asked why. But something was broken, not out of cruelty or betrayal. It just was. And in that stillness, I saw the truth. You can love someone and still outgrow the space where that love used to live. Jason and I met once more, in the cabin. This time we didn't kiss. We sat on the porch instead, wine between us, and looked out at the trees. I'm going to move, he said. Back east. My sister needs help with her kids. I think it's time. I nodded. Are you angry? He asked. No, I said. I'm glad you told me. He looked at me, eyes soft. I loved you, still do, but I never wanted to be the thing you used to escape. You weren't, I whispered. You were the first place I ever ran toward. We didn't say goodbye, not really. Just a long look, a touch of hands. Then I left. Now, months later, I'm living in a smaller house near the shore. Mark and I separated quietly, no screaming, no drawn-out battles, just two adults who decided to loosen the rope instead of watching each other drown. We still talk, sometimes over coffee, sometimes not for weeks. Jason sends postcards, short ones, a photo of a bookstore, a mountain trail, a handwritten note. Saw a woman with your smile today. Made me ache. I keep them in a drawer. I don't open often. I'm not with anyone now, but I'm with myself. And for the first time in years, that feels like enough. The necklace, the one Jason gave me, I wear it sometimes. Not every day, but enough to remember that for a while I was wanted, chosen, seen. This isn't a story about regret. It's a story about waking up and learning how to breathe in your own body again, even if it means doing it alone.